Welcome to this video interview today, and I'm here with Elke Zschaebitz, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us about her credentials and the work that she is doing.
Great. My name is Elke Jones Zschaebitz. I am a nurse practitioner. I have it's a doctor of nursing practice. I've been a nurse practitioner, a nurse since 1988 and a nurse practitioner since 1998. And I have been doing the work in trans care since 2014, which is of late. My work has expanded over the years through, with my focus being in telehealth, kind of ironically now in COVID. But reaching out to people who live either rural areas or need specialty and can't get that care, as well as the autism community. I have a stepson with severe autism, and learning about, learning. I did not know a lot about it, and I've been learning by living through it, and also just through my work with working with patients. And so obviously I tend to lean towards vulnerable populations who have a really hard time accessing healthcare, or are discriminated against, or are a very small population that gets overlooked.
Absolutely. Well, you know that my mission is to be a bridge to churches to help
Yeah.
them
Mm-hmm.
have understanding, awareness, and information. So you're part of that
Thank you.
in providing this to me with us today. So tell us about what you do and how you were inspired to work in this field.
I am a family nurse practitioner. I've been a nurse since 1988 and lived mostly overseas, working with the military. And then in 2007, I came back to the United States to teach for UVA. I was back and forth a couple times back to the US, but I teach now at Georgetown University in the Family Nurse Practitioner program, and I work in clinic at some clinics that give healthcare to trans individuals. And I have a cadre of colleagues across Central Virginia and beyond who do the same. And we've got a really tight-knit group dedicated to the advocacy and the education and the care of people who are what I consider the most vulnerable population. So when I came to work at this healthcare clinic in Charlottesville called Thrive Healthcare, it's since doesn't exist anymore. It was the AIDS services group established in the 1980s in Charlottesville that was losing their grant funding. And so they decided that they wanted to open up a primary care clinic to reach out to people who were disenfranchised. And they were looking for a nurse practitioner, and a friend of mine was already working there as a psych NP. And we were having dinner, and she said, I said, are you still looking for a family nurse practitioner? And she said, yeah, we are. And I said, well, I think I'd like to throw my hat in there. And I was working at Fort Lee in the Wilkinson Pediatric Clinic, but it was a very long drive for me. So I was looking and we decided just to stay in Charlottesville. And so she said, that would be great. So then I interviewed for the job and got the job. But one of the missions of the clinic was to serve the population who were transitioning or had transitioned. And I said, I don't know anything about that, doing hormones or giving care. And I said, but I'm willing to learn. So the CEO and the clinic sent me to a couple of conferences the one was Philadelphia conference, trans conference up in Philly. And I went up there and met people and learned all about hormone care. And I'm like, this is actually easier, like medically, than diabetes. So I was like, I think I feel comfortable, but I need to have maybe mentors people can reach out to if I have questions. And so we took that plunge, and I read a lot and collaborated a lot, and I was part of this group that had already joined the Transgender Healthcare Alliance of Central Virginia, which is included endocrinologists and pediatricians from the Charlottesville area. And then it became a big ball of healthcare providers, advocates, people who identify as trans or non-binary, and just became more involved. And when Thrive Healthcare ended up losing money and just not being solvent, so I ended up moving to. This is a long. I apologize for the length of
I love it. I really
this.
want to hear your journey. I really do.
I ended up interviewing for a job at UVA Student Health because I was like, well, I need a job now because I knew that they were going to be closing their doors. So actually, the UVA Student Health Center was very interested in my work with the population. And so I interviewed and got the job there. And the vision of the leadership actually let me run with that motive and to help establish the first trans healthcare at UVA Student Health.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was a big deal. I had already been treating people, but I certainly wasn't an expert at all because I was pretty much a novice. But I had found a group of colleagues who were interested, and the mental health people who were helping, the counseling group, the psychologists, and just the community in general were very enveloping and pretty celebratory. So we were recognized across the whole entire grounds at UVA for paving the way.
Wow.
So much that they became, they got a really high score on their what's called the Pride Index, which is when people are looking where to go to college, they want to know, are they going to a safe place, right?
Wow.
So. And I've been learning ever since. We all have. It's not just me. When I was really like, how come I didn't learn this in my education, formal education? And I found out nobody did because it wasn't something that we were aware of. Since then, I have close colleagues that had been doing surgeries way back in like the 1970s, but it just wasn't something that we learned about until up late. And I don't know what the defining moment was, but it maybe, I just don't know. But I'm glad it is.
Yeah, me too. And I'll just say now, one of my blog posts is, why am I just now finding out my sister was transgender? Because as I've worked on my book, I created a book trailer, I've been trying to network with people on LinkedIn who work in the helping professions for people who are transgender, and there's so many all around the world. But one person asked me, why are you just now finding out? And all the clues were there, but it wasn't talked about. And anyway, just this whole journey of kind of breaking through it, was I in denial, or did I lack information, or did those two things go together, and how do they correlate? So becoming aware and getting information is really important. And I'm really interested in your journey as a physician of becoming aware and getting more information. That's exactly what I'm doing this past year.
The thirst for knowledge and to help people and to have them feel safe has been just, I call it a ball that's just like a snowball. During my journey of learning more and more and more, I've had the opportunity, because UVA Student Health was so generous with their supportive professional development. I went to the Canadian Professional Association of Trans Health. And that was in Vancouver a couple of years ago. And I sat in the group. It was Canadian, but some Americans were there. I was one of the few ones. But there I learned more about fertility for people who are transgender or non-binary. About how well the Canadian healthcare system supports, because it's universal healthcare, they support families. And so people that were there with babies who, had fertility treatment that didn't cost them an arm and a leg. And I also learned, because they had these speakers there, about the First Nation people, which we call Native Americans.
Right.
One of the most, the one that stuck out in my mind, and I'd have to look up their name, is a person who is a First Nation person who lives in the area, who is transgender. And they talked to us about two spirits Like they way back in that culture, they called those special people two-spirit people. And I thought, wow, okay.
Yeah.
They just were embraced as special people and they had two spirits, right? And I thought, wow, that's really beautiful. And it's something that I hadn't thought about in the paradigm of our duality here, that there really is a spectrum of being, a spectrum of expressing yourself, an expression of sexuality. There's expressions, and it's something that I have learned as an adult growing up. And what I've learned living overseas, because I did live overseas for about 14 years, is I'm sort of more Dutch than anything. I really embrace the UBU. I had a student working with this past month who is learning to be a nurse practitioner, and she was in the clinic with me. She was watching me do the hormone therapy, and we were talking about the UBU, and how beautiful that is to be able to just love people for who they are, and nobody has to hide from who they are. Very much a person, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, just be fully expressed and be willing to love everyone for who they are, and to accept them and support them in their self-actualization. So
So can you say some words to help us, all the people who may be listening, with various people who want to be allies and advocates of people who are transgender, family members of people who are transgender, or transgender people themselves who are looking for a resource to show friends and family? Help us understand the experience with, the experience within a gender versus the male or female categorized that we will assign an infant at birth.
I can honestly say that I've only done a little bit of reading about the biological origins. I will tell you that when I started to tell my friends and colleagues, former colleagues, what I was doing, you do have a lot of opinions from people, but one of my most treasured colleagues who I worked with in Germany with the Department of Defense school system, she said, I just found out recently that one of my cousins was, as an infant, born intersex, what we used to call hermaphrodite. And she said that they died during some kind of surgical procedure, maybe, I don't know what they called it back then, but this is back in the early 1900s. And then she told her that, no, darling, that wasn't why. That was because they were assigning that child a sex and doing the surgery for it already when they were like 2 or 3 or 4. And and the child died.
Wow.
So this phenomenon of being either intersex or that emerging, some people who identify as trans, when you read their stories, they know when they're very young, or sometimes they first find out when those sex hormones start to emerge. And those are usually in puberty, like early puberty, and they feel like they're in the wrong body. And I can't even imagine, puberty, as hard as it is, how hard that must be to just feel like you're in the wrong body and to not know what to do about it. So we like to box people into categories to help us understand. And what I want people to kind of take away today is that everyone's experience is completely different. Everybody comes from a different family. Their growing up experiences were different. Everything about them is unique. And so there are some similarities, but everybody's journey and experience is completely just their own. And so you kind of have to meet people where they are and just support them. I've had family members come into the clinic when people were getting hormones. Either they were young and the parent had to be there, or they came as a support person because they were very against people getting hormones, but then they read books that helped them understand, and then they were very supportive. So I usually like to ask people what books help them. And so there's a bunch, and I haven't had the time, and I'm self-disclosed that the resources that I tell patients to use is from the University of California, San Francisco Guidelines of Excellence. in trans
Yeah.
health. They have
Yeah.
videos that it's very transparent about how we move. It's in alignment with the WPATH, which is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. This is very aligned and evidence-based. There's nothing unsafe about it. But some of the books that I've read are, I remember one mom said she read Becoming Nicole,
Yeah.
and that really helped her just flip around. And so
Oh, yeah, that's a really good book.
I had a patient who is Korean and knew that their parents were going to have a really hard time with this, and I suggested that book and just remind patients that their parents love them. Usually, you know, like you have parents that are just like got their own agendas, but usually parents really love their children and they worry about them. You know, you worry about them being safe, and I just remind them, you know, be gentle with your parents. This may or may not be a surprise to them, and then this is going to take some time for them to grieve over losing their one child they thought they had, and then their new child. And then you of course read, you know, when you're on social media, you read about wonderful grandmas who are finally like, nice to meet you, my new granddaughter, you know, and that was formerly their grandson. And it's so those kind of things just melt my heart, because that's the way we should all be. We should all be that grandma, you know.
Right.
So so there's plenty of books out there. There's a lot of theoretical books from other colleagues that do work in this field. And I'm sure there's a list of books out there. I just haven't had a chance to make a list of books. And maybe I would be reinventing the wheel from somebody who's already done it.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to gather some books, and particularly I found some theological books and books really aimed at Christians or people of various faiths who are kind of wondering, like, I did a post on what does the Bible say about gender identity, and I was really inspired by a book by Austin Hartke, and you know, God created the sun and the moon, but it's not mentioned. There's like lots of suns, lots of moons. You know, it's just like a poetry with the truth that God created, but it doesn't give everything, and male and female, but that doesn't mean there's not everything in between. And even the Hebrew word ish and isha, anyway, there's a whole something to talk about in terms of the Hebrew and how it's been interpreted, but the Jewish community is really seems to be, or I've been told, that generally more affirming and understanding, and maybe it's some of that understanding of the Hebrew. But anyway, that's yes. So we already on my next question of what resources do transgender people need from their families and communities?
I think their biggest resource is love. And acceptance and support, emotional support. That's like the 80-20. And so just understanding and helping to know, for them to know, and this is what we all need as humans, is that unconditional love, that you know, we only have a certain amount of time on earth, and that we're meant to be growing and learning. And why, you know, I ask myself why, when I have hard things go through in my life, I said, why, you know, is there a theme here? What should I be learning right now from what's happening to me? There's this, I need to learn from this. It helps me become a more complete person. And so it's just for people to learn and be open and to love. Some people I know that have struggled because of faith reasons. My husband is actually a former minister. He studied at Union Seminary in New York City. So he's a social worker now. He's the director of telehealth at UVA, but he when we talk sometimes about things, he, you know, studied the Hebrew while he was in seminary and told me about some passages where God is woman and man together. So, and that has been translated into Yes. So I was like, well, how come we don't know about that? No, why didn't wait, what? I did the wait, what thing. So again, we can all go back to what the origins of things and the way things were meant to be and why things unfolded. And really, when you peel it all down, it just comes back to us all caring for each other and loving each other and wanting us to be safe. And so even it comes down to like the things that people had to eat back, you know, in the Hebrew times is like, you don't eat this because you could die from a disease. So we don't want you to eat that, you know. So, and it was very smart. And then you have people who just want to control everybody. So sometimes it just takes people a longer time than others to open their hearts up. I think that when you know somebody that you love, it's just like when it's personal, it's easier. When it's not anybody you know, it might be harder. But I can tell you that if you were to know the people that I know, you would love them.
Yeah.
They're all beautiful people. You know, I have a big heart for them, and they're all doing different things. They're all different. They're all in the communities.
Yeah.
All amazing things and living their lives. I think going up to somebody and calling them, asking them what their name is. We might have met before.
Right.
Tell me your new name, or tell me your name and how, and I want to know more. I would love to have coffee with you. I would love to learn more. I want to know how I can help you, help your life be easier, or I just want to let you know how brave I think you are, or I love the fact that you know, whatever it is. You know, or you can say, I'm sorry that you hurt so much before this time, and I'm glad you are who you are, and you.
Yes. That's good. No, I like that. That's really good and very specific in how to approach people. And I think that's really, really good.